Hi folks, with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast. In this essay, I'd like to talk about three things, I guess. The incoming Trump administration in the United States, President Trump and the incoming administration, will his administration, I hope they will they put pressure on all the Western countries, the same amount of pressure, and in the same way that pressure was applied by previous US administrations on those Western countries, forcing those countries or certainly strong-arming them into going down the mass migration, Green New Deal, climate change path. Now, the US, given its economic clout, was able to push these other countries around, whether it be Britain, Australia, or whoever, and encourage them to engage in this insane mass migration and suicidal, in my view. But now, given those US administrations used the power and the clout of the US to force the globalization agenda on these countries, will the incoming Trump administration, in just the same way, force these Western countries to move away from globalization, mass migration and the Green New Deal being key, and there are others, but key among them. So I hope they do, and I hope they go at it just as hard as, again, the US was in pushing the globalization agenda. Just on the matter of immigration, though, now the political class, under globalist control, they claim there are two reasons for the migration. One is Western countries aren't reproducing themselves. They're not even doing two children per woman, and we can play around with the statistics a bit there. For example, women are living a lot longer now than they were, 50 years ago. So when we're doing it, statistics per woman, it should be really statistics per woman of childbearing age, and women are having children a lot later in life now, so that the childbearing age has expanded, and those. So when you actually jig the numbers, it's not as grim as the propagandists claim, because the propagandists say, well, look, there's only 1.5 women per 1.5 children per woman, 1.5 births per woman. Look at that disaster. We have to have mass migration, and that's not true. It's not as bad as they make out, but it is less than the birth rate that we were seeing in the 1960s and 70s, for example. Now, I believe that declining population in the current age is not an issue. It's not a big deal. It's not a problem. When we look at the increase in automation, robotization, if we look at AI and all the other forms of nanotechnology, all of those things together are causing a reduction in the size and the numerical mass of the workforce that's needed. So I don't see declining population as a problem at all, given those other factors. If there wasn't the automation, the robotization, AI, the nanotechnology stuff, then it would be a different matter. But those things are very real, and they're causing a substantial reduction in not just factory floor type jobs, but also in other jobs, accounting and all sorts of what were hitherto seen as higher skilled jobs. But coming back to the migration issue, whether you look at Britain, Canada, the United States, anywhere, Australia, the mass migration is insane. Of the 500,000 people that were brought into Australia last year, out of 500,000, about 20,000 are considered economically viable, approximately. Some go as high as 25,000, but I couldn't find any figures higher than that. Let's run the 25,000 just sort of to be generous here. So out of 500,000 people being brought into Australia, most of whom were from India, by the way, only 25,000 are economically viable. What's meant by economically viable? Economically viable means they can speak English, they have skills and or qualifications, credentials, preferably both, that mean that they can pretty much walk into a job in areas where there are skill shortages. Now, this skill shortage is a scam. For example, some years ago, Australia was saying they were short on aeronautical engineers. So a whole bunch of aeronautical engineers were brought in from Britain primarily. And I've met one of these, and he's still unemployed, 5 years down the track. In his field, he's got other employment since, but in aeronautical engineering, where there was supposedly a chronic, end of the world shortage, he couldn't get a job. He struggled to even get interviews, and then he just can't work it out. How could they say there was such a shortage when in fact there was no shortage at all? So a lot of these and a lot of the skills that they put on the skills list are absurd. I mean, absolutely absurd. I mean, the abuse of the skill shortage list in Australia is insane. We're short on dishwashers, we're short on burger flippers, we're short on people to paint nails in salons, all this sort of stuff. I mean, it's bullshit. And then bringing people in from India who've got all these fake bullshit degrees from one of the most corrupt countries in the world, and they can't do the job. So anyway, 20 out of 500,000, generously, it's 25,000 people that are economically needed. Now, if even those 25,000 people, if they have a spouse, for example, then that's 50,000. Not all of them do, but for example. And if they even have one child, then you're looking at 75. They have two children, it's 100,000. Now, there's a mix. Some are single men, some are single women, for example. Some are married couple with two children, school age and so on. The preference, I think, should be given to married couples with school-age children. I mean, for children to assimilate, have a reasonable chance of assimilating, they need to really, I don't know, say do the entire high school education. Maybe that would be a sort of a good line to. So if they've got two primary school or younger type children, then that would be, if the child can do the entire education, 12 years of school education in Australia or in their adopted country, wherever it is, America or wherever, then that they'll in balance, if they're from the West or a first world country, they'll by that stage they'll be pretty much acclimatized to the local culture and so on. Now, looking at last year, as best as I can work out, and for the last few years, especially with the open borders, the United States took in something like, as I understand it, took in something in the order of 2.5 million illegals. This is just crossing the border. This doesn't include things like visa overstays, of which there are many hundreds of thousands. But now, those illegals that came, that's the adults only, and they're the ones that are known about. A lot of those people also had children. So that 2.5 million, could be closer to 5 million in reality, if not more, if you include children. And so, and then there was around, I think, around 750, give or take, around 750,000, 800,000 legal migrants were brought in. Some say that it's closer to 1 million, a little bit over 1 million, but between, say, 900,000 and 1.1 million. So, cut the difference and say 1 million. So that's 3.5. You look at the visa overstays, that's not including children. That's just on 4 million people coming per year into the United States. I mean, that's an insane number of people coming in. That's more than 1% of the more than 1% of the population every year, just from migration, be it legal or otherwise. Now, if we look at the United States birth rate and we look at the skills shortages where they genuinely are, not where greedy companies are just looking for cheap labour to house them 20 to a 2-bedroom apartment and then screw them on the wages. I'm not talking about that, but genuinely needed skills. Then the again, assuming husband and wife and 2 children, the United States would only need 250,000 migrants a year. That would be it. They wouldn't need any more than that. That would give population stability, keeping it give or take around where it is, and would also bring skills in. and skilled people that can start up businesses, can invent the cure for cancer, and all that sort of stuff. Skilled people, and genuinely needed skills, not bullshit made up skills, but genuinely needed. Then that's all we needed. So Australia would be fine with 25,000 a year, skilled migration. The United States, 250 to 300,000. It depends how many young children they've got. So there's a bit of rubber there to move, but give or take 300 odd thousand. Britain again. Britain would only need 50,000 maximum. Germany 60,000. France 50,000. So these are the numbers, the realistic numbers that achieve both of the supposedly prime objectives: population stability, to make up for the shortfall in births, which isn't as severe as is claimed, by the way. And the second thing is to bring in needed skills. Now, it's a little bit harder for, say, countries where, like not many people in the world speak Polish, for example. So they've got a harder time, more difficult time if they want to attract people in that speak Polish and have skills. So then they would need to do it a little bit differently. For example, I say Poland, but say in countries like in Scandinavia, English is widely spoken in the higher IP professions. So you could still be productive there. Holland the same, Belgium not so much. So looking at this in the overall, the migration could plummet by 80+%. And still it would achieve, again, the prime objectives of population stability and skills. So I would hope, my hope is that President Trump and his team, his administration, start pushing hard on the other Western countries to, no, globalization is out, guys. Mass migration is out. This is the new game in town. And I hope very much that they use whatever devices of coercion, as previous administrations did, enforcing the globalization project on these countries. Say, look, you've got to stop this and reduce your migration intake, and also expel all these surpluses. In Australia, millions upon millions of Indians and Chinese being brought that aren't needed, and they should be very welcome to be invited to go back to their countries of origin. You've been with Tassos today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.